anyhow, we're pleased to have with us both Tony Maro and Dan Niemiec. It's an exciting time for genealogy in general because of the 1940 census coming out, and they'll have something to say about it. And the other thrust of our presentation is the Casa Italia Library. We'd like you to join us. We're here on Monday afternoons, full group, and the library is pretty much available whenever the building is open. And we do have a staff member here from 9 to 5, and you can avail yourself to the opportunity. So, did you guys decide to start? Okay, okay. Tony Maro volunteered was about a year ago or so. Tony, and he has done fantastic work with the Italians in Chicago Oral History Project. This goes back some 30 years when we interviewed over 100 Italians in the Chicago area. We not only interviewed them, we had on tape, we had those tapes transcribed. Tony has been working very hard. He has more than 50% of them online.
About half.
About 50% of them are online. You can access
I have some flyers out on the table.
Okay, okay. Okay, he's already, but I wanted to say something that he couldn't say about himself, or maybe he would say about himself, but we wouldn't believe it. He's been very, very helpful, and he's worked really hard at this. And if you know anything about scanning and putting stuff up on the web, it's tedious and it's demanding, but he's stuck to it. And we're very grateful to him, and I think it's a major contribution. I don't know any place else in the country that has so many Italian interviews online as we're coming to have. So without further ado, Tony Maro.
Okay, thank you, Donnie. Dan will be with you in a minute, okay? I'm here, Dan's the real genealogist, and I'm just an amateur genealogist. I've been doing it for about 10 years, and I don't even remember how I got started. Somebody put the screw in my head or something, and I decided, yeah, I'd like to know that. And of course, I went through the whole, boy, I wish I would have talked to my grandmother a little bit more, because she knew everything and I didn't. She was gone. And, so we kind of started from scratch. My mother's still alive, and she's 92. She's going to be 93. She remembers a lot of stuff, but there's other things that I remember that she doesn't remember, and I'll ask her about a name. Who was Tarzan that used to come over to our house? We had a guy named Tarzan coming over to our house. I wasn't the real Tarzan, but she doesn't know. I grew up in Roseland on the far south side. My father's father was from Calabria, Castrovillari, and eventually Alessandria del Coretto. My mother's father was from Termini and Marisi in Sicily. Both of my grandmothers were born in Chicago. So I started my genealogy trip, and I fortunately had a sister that was real helpful, and she was also interested, and there was an added benefit. At that time, she became a member of the Mormon Church, and she used to work in one of the family history centers down in Texas. So she was really helpful. So we started out, and we used that, any of you familiar with PAF personal ancestry file that you can download for free from Family Search. It's basically one of these family tree softwares where you can put your name in, and then you can add your father, and you can add your mother, and then you can keep taking it back as you get more information. Of course, you put birth date, date of death, christening if they were christened, and all kinds of things. But there's others on the market, but you have to pay for them. This one is free from, as I said, called FamilySearch.org is the website. And the product is PAF 5.2. And so I started gathering information. I had basically, I started out going to the Mormon church and looking at the microfilms. And that's really, after about 2 hours of looking at those microfilms, you get nuts. Lately, all of that stuff is online, and not all of it, but they're adding every day. And my career was a computer consultant, so I did that for about 45 years. So this is a real godsend for me. I've been to, you know, the Ellis Island website, the Castle Garden website, and by the way, that's both our immigration websites. And Dan, I don't know if you've ever used Steve Morse, but I prefer to search with the Steve Morse JewishGen.org search engine when I'm looking for immigration information. I found that really helpful. I thought it was better than Ellis Island. Of course, Family Search. I use Ancestry, but I use it at the library because I don't want to pay the $99 to bring it home. In my case, my sister, since my mother's from Termini and Maurice, there's a website devoted entirely to Termini and Maurice, and I think that Laura Johnson is the webmaster. And they had indexed all of the microfilm from Termini and Maurice and made it searchable, so you could go there, look up somebody's name, find the row and the document number that the actual document was on, then go to the Family History Center, get that row, look for that document, and then save it. And that's another thing. Being in the computer business all my life, I never print anything. I never print anything. It's too hard to keep track of. I always, when I go to the library, when I go to Family History Center, I always bring my little thumb drive, and I save it on my thumb drive, come home, put it in one of my folders where I've got it all organized. I can print it anytime then, but I can also find it a lot easier, and I don't have to keep track of all the paper. When I first started, I did that, and I got one of those accordion folders. I filled that up and got about this wide, and then I had to go buy another one, and it just didn't work out. So I don't print anything anymore. And of course, that's in our business. That's what they're always, you know, telling you anyway. Save a tree, don't print. State of Illinois has a website. Cook County has a website. You can get a Social Security index anywhere. So what does all this amount to? I recorded all this data, not only my family, but other names, like this Tarzan guy. If I would have known his last name, I would have recorded him. But I mean, we've got Gregos, and we've got Politos, and we've got Napolis, and you know, just all kinds of names in our family that are somehow related. So and I think Dan will point out later, you know, when they came over here, they came in 2s, 3s, 4s, 10s, and so the people that are with them are probably either a relation or a very good friend of the family or cousin or something. So I recorded their information as well. And I had all this information on my computer, and I'm trying to show my mother what her ancestry is, and print a report out of this free software, and it looks like hieroglyphics, and to my mother, it really looked like hieroglyphics. I mean, she couldn't read anything. I said, this is where you came from. You know, and she said, I came from there? And it just wasn't working. So what I decided to do was, okay, I'm going to write a little story about it instead. And maybe that'll help her to understand. So I started out writing, it's kind of a timeline thing, and put a little cover on it. This is it in digital form. So I've got a little cover. That's a picture of the church in Termini and Marisi, where most of them were baptized or christened. This other church is Sant'Alessandro and Alessandria del Coretto. That's where the other side of my family was from. And I'm going to take you to one of these chapters. I've got great-grandparents, I've got great-great-grandparents, I've got grandparents. But I'm going to take you here. So I tried to write, by the way, I'll pass this along. This is what, you know, this is not complete, but this is what it'll look like, sort of, when it's done. And that's what I would give to my mother and my children and cousins and whoever else is interested. But what I did was try to write a timeline. So this is about my, I don't want that one. Let me get to a different one. Sorry. This mouse is a little tiny. You can see these documents coming up. I'll explain that in a minute. I hope. Okay. I think I just saw it. So the way I started to write this was I started with my grandfather. He was Giuseppe Mantia. And I said he was born in Termini and Marisi on 17th September 1885. Well, then I said, well, I have to be able to prove that. I can't just say it, so I have to be able to prove it. So I put a little sort of footnote in here, and if you click that, it goes to the proof that that was actually him, and he was born in 17th September 1885. You probably can't read it up here unless I enlarge it, but what it says is, he was born Giuseppe La Mantia. His father was Salvatore, his mother was Josephina, and his name was Giuseppe. So, as I said, I'm trying to prove everything that I've said in the narrative part of it.
Is that a document you got online?
Yeah. That one is, no, that one is, that one would be where I went to the Termini and Marisi, or my sister told me, this is the roll, and this is the document. I went over to the Family History Center, and actually in Naperville, they have on permanent loan all of the Termini and Marisi microfilms. So I got it there, and then I just saved it to my thumb drive or flash drive, and as I said, now I can do whatever I want with it. And so all I wanted to point out here was that I'm trying to prove things here's the visual proof. When I said, you know, in 1900 they lived at XYZ, you look here on lines 27 to 34, I can't see it again, but it's going to show the entire family living there at that address. And that address is probably going to be 2444, because you know in 1909 all of the street numbers were changed in Chicago. So 2444 isn't necessarily where 2444 is now. It would be about Western Avenue, and there is no Kensington on Western Avenue, so.
Is there some way to find that out then?
Yeah, there's a document that you can download from the web that has all of the old number, new numbers for each street in Chicago. And the only other thing that that I'd like to say is, when I did this, it pointed out a lot of flaws that I had in all of this information. I have about 1,200 people in my catalog in my family tree. And it would be like, you know, I started to write and said, well, so-and-so was born in 1885. He joined the Army in 1860. You know, and it didn't work. And that pointed out all of these little flaws, and then I would have to stop, go back, figure out what happened, come back, change the document, and go from there. But it was really helpful to clear everything up. Yes, ma'am?
I have a question. You said that your grandfather was born La Mantilla.
Yes.
Yes, the name was Mantilla.
Right. Yeah, I don't really know what happened there. When I look on his birth certificate, his father is a La Mantilla, he is a La Mantilla. Then in 1905, there's an entry on one of those microfilm rolls that says he changed his name from La Mantilla to Mantilla.
My great-grandmother's last name was Likowski, and so the prefix was L-I, just like it would be D-E or D-I or, you know, names like La Mantilla. And when I was in Sicily a few years ago, I had mentioned to the fella at the Comune that I saw all of these names that said Causi, C-A-U-S-I, and I didn't think that it was the same name, and he said that's because when they indexed them, they removed the prefix.
Right. And when I look for La Mantilla or Mantilla, I always look under M anyway.
Yeah.
Because over in the left margin, it's going to say LA, but it'll be alphabetical as Mantilla. That's all I have. Any other questions?
What was the website, the web address for the streets that were, when was that, 1909, Chicago Street?
I'll get that for you, but can I get it later?
Oh, okay.
Okay.
It's at the Chicago History Museum website, what used to be the Chicago Historical Society. And I don't know, the full URL is long, but it's on their website. That's where you would look for this.
Thank you.
It's also, it's probably also in the links page. I'll give you my website. I think it's in the links page there too.
Okay, if there's no other questions, then...
You mentioned about Naperville, about going someplace in Naperville.
Yeah, there's a Mormon, I call it a Mormon church, I guess it should be Church of Latter-day Saints, but there's a Mormon church in Naperville on Naperville Boulevard, and they have microfilm viewers, and they have a bunch of rolls of microfilm and things like that. And they don't charge you.
You can download it there.
Yeah, when you find something, you can download it to your flash drive, but it's not easy. I understand that some of the libraries have some fancier readers or viewers where you can do it all in one fell swoop. Plainfield is one of them.
There's one in Schaumburg, they've got their viewer hooked up to a computer.
They have?
And you just put your thumb drive in, and whenever you see what you want to copy, just tell it to...
Yeah, that's great, because at Naperville you have to take the reel off, flip it over,
one other thing to note, not every one of those, there's multiple family libraries, they call them. And there's one in Chicago Heights if you have relatives from there, and, not all of the Italian records are on site.
Oh,
So
right,
you have to
exactly.
go and
Good
you have
point.
to request them from
Salt
the,
Lake City.
from the
On the
main, from
computer now,
Utah,
right?
yeah.
You have to
And
do it
they'll
on the
send a
computer.
copy to that center that'll be there for X amount of weeks. And it's a nominal fee, like $5.
They raised it at
$5.50.
7 or something.
Yeah, so,
I'll cover that in a few minutes.
so, yeah, so you gotta remember, they're not always there. You might have to wait a couple weeks for them to get there.
Okay, let me introduce Mr. Dan Niemiec.
Thank you very much. Let's see if my computer's gonna start here, or if we're gonna have any, there we go. Okay, so when I had this at work, it had a font that looked just like the page on the right, and then I got it home, and I don't have that font, so it's this plain, bland little font, but I had it all nice and written like, this is the front page of one of the books at the church in my ancestral town. I'm gonna get to that part, hopefully toward the latter end of this discussion. I see familiar faces, I see people I don't know. I'm going to kind of give you a mass overview of a lot of the different kind of resources that are available to you. As far as, you know, there's not going to be a lot of specific detail on using each one, because then we'd be here till about 7 or 8 o'clock tonight. And but I do want to make sure that I cover. If I forget, somebody point out and say, hey, talk about the 1940 census, because that is going to be coming up. If this talk was a week from now, we'd be able to talk about it online, but it's not released to the public till April 2nd due to the privacy rules. Looking up your Italian genealogy, family history, however you want to call it, but it's a lot of the same information. The genealogy that was looked up, that Tony did, he then put into a narrative and turned it into a family history. And I know there's another discussion on Friday, April 13th, where there's going to be other people also besides us who are going to talk about different ways to make that information more palatable and more understandable to family members. But I want to talk about how do you get the data first, because you got to have something to be able to present to them. There are American records that we need. When everybody starts their first day of their Italian genealogy, the first thing they need to figure out is, okay, who am I, who are my parents, who are my grandparents, and more to the point, who is my immigrant ancestor? Some people in this room, it might be themselves, they may be the immigrant. To some it's their parents, in my case it's my grandparents. But in order to figure out where we're from, and by the way, my grandaunts and everybody told me, my Italian grandfather left the family, so I didn't get to talk to him about this. But his half-sister says, our family is from Bari. Okay, well that's great. If I'd have just run off and tried to find records from the city of Bari, I would have been frustrated, given up, and taken up like needlepoint or something. I don't know what I would have done. So it's a good thing, because they tell you that you're from a big city. I mean, if you're talking to somebody from Virginia, you probably say you're from Chicago, even if you're not, you know, because what does Vernon Hills mean, or what does Stone Park mean to somebody who isn't familiar with the area? So you end up telling people it's the big city. So the first thing you need to do is you need to find the tiny little community in Italy where your family came from. And you need to use American type of records, the paper trail they leave here, to find that. And then the family history centers will end up having Italian records that we need to use here in the United States. People, I've actually gotten calls and emails from people who I've never met before who say, I'm going to Italy in 2 weeks and I need to start my family history, help me out. And I'm like, well, go to Italy, put coins in the Trevi Fountain, go to the Grotto of the Popes, and go, and don't bother with your genealogy on this trip. You're not ready, okay? You need to find as much data as you can here in the States with American records, and then there are just thousands of reels of microfilms they alluded to a minute ago of Italian civil records, in some cases Italian church records, not too many, that are available through the Latter-day Saints Family History Centers here. Okay, I'll try to name the ones I can remember. We've got Chicago Heights, we've got Schaumburg, Buffalo Grove, even the Arlington Heights Public Library is sort of a family history center. They can have films sent from Salt Lake City to that public library, and Crystal Lake and Naperville, and there's a bunch of others I probably don't remember. For those who have not been to a family history center in a while, things have changed. Film ordering is all done online now. It's all paid for by credit card. You don't walk in anymore and fill out a slip and hand it to the staff member. Those days are over with. Everything's done online. But when you go to the catalog and you look for a film, it'll also tell you, you set up where your home family history center is going to be. Okay, if you're closest to Naperville or you're closest to Buffalo Grove, you set that up for yourself in a login. And then you put in a film number or you look it up in the catalog, and it's going to tell you if that film is in that center. Couldn't do that before. And that's a big help. And if the film is already online and digitized by LDS, it'll tell you that too. So the Chicago Archdiocesan sacramental records, Catholic sacramental records, all of those films are already online at familysearch.org. Right now they're not searchable, but they are physically online, and you can scroll through them at 3 o'clock in the morning in your bunny slippers, okay? You don't have to go to the Family History Center to look there for the baptism record from 1912 of somebody, okay? So there's a lot of changes that have happened out there. But more to the point is, as I said, each of the Italian microfilms, civil records, church records that are physically available, they're all out in Salt Lake City for the most part, but unless you're lucky enough to have somebody already doing research in that part of the world. I mean, Termini Morezi's records are all at Naperville because somebody else has already been working on it, and all of the Trigiano Bari records, for example, are all at Buffalo Grove because that's where I work on mine. So just by sheer luck, you can walk in and they might have those films already there. But for the most part, for 99.9% of people who are just starting this, you're going to walk into the closest family history center to your house and they're not going to have those films already sitting there. You have to have them ordered, and you got to do that online now because of the way they've changed it. So these are Italian resources available in the United States. Now that gets you back to Italy. Okay, here's it. So you're going to work on your records, and the way I had to do it was keep tracing back as many different generations, 2 at a time, and I'm building this tree that, you know, grows and grows. And the records, the earliest records are, from my area of Italy, were from 1809. Okay, Sicily's usually about 1820-ish is where those kind of start. If you're from the north, there's not a lot on microfilm, unfortunately. But from the south, Sicily, Italy, you know, Bari and Calabria and all the different, you know, southern provinces, most of that stuff's on microfilm in some form. But when you get back to 1809, you trace the ancestry back by kind of lather, rinse, repeat. You're just going to keep doing the same thing over and over for each generation, and then you're going to finally hit a wall. Hey, I can't go back any further. I've got a guy born in 1789, and there's no records for 1789. They stop, 1809 is the earliest they start. Now what do I do? Now you're ready to start planning a trip to Italy to go look at the church records in your town. So you then have Italian resources available only in Italy, where you can't get them from here. So you've got American resources, American stuff, or Italian stuff in America, Italian stuff only in Italy, and then you're going to be dealing with Latin records only in Italy. Remember when popes were Italian? It's been a while. So you're going to be dealing with some Latin writing. When you're dealing with the civil records, it's all going to be written in Italian. But I still to this day don't speak the language. I understand only bits and pieces of it. Usually when my grandaunt is, you know, swearing at me, I think I know her dialect too, from the swear words. But for all of this, I have no problem reading the Italian records. I have no problem reading the Latin. You eventually are going to pick up which words in those records. Don't be scared of it is the point, okay? Even talking about taking the film and making the copies of it sounded complicated, and I heard a couple groans in the audience. It's not complicated. After you've done it once or twice, you'll get used to it. You'll be like, oh yeah, okay, found a record, flip, put it on, and be done with it. It's not a big deal. There's nothing to be scared of in this whole process. Boy, is he looking mean. That's my step-great-grandfather in a good mood. So you need to figure out who's your immigrant ancestor, okay? Most of you in here probably already know that, or at least in your mind. If you haven't even thought about it yet, it's like, oh yeah, Grandma was born in Italy. And you'll have that. And again, it's not enough to know what province or what region. It's not enough to say I'm Neapolitan. It's not enough to say I'm from, you've got to know the name of the little comune, the little town, because that's how the records are filed, that's how the records are cataloged. So you need to know that, okay? There's places that are good resources and you don't want to ignore them, but they're not going to help you find the name of the town. The census, okay, including 1940, is only going to say the name of the country or the name of the U.S. state where someone is born. And that's helpful, but it's not going to give you the name of the town. I can't find out where this grimacing guy was born. It just says he was born in Italy, okay? Death certificates sometimes are accurate. Sometimes they're filled out by hospital staff. Understandably, the closest family members are distraught at that particular moment in time, and just all the cells just aren't firing. It's just normal, okay? So you end up with even inaccurate information sometimes coming from the immediate family who is reporting on the death of a spouse or a parent. So sometimes they're not all that detailed. If you're lucky enough, that's good, but you don't always get, and you get a lot of misspellings too. Because again, when the immigrant passes away and the spouse of the immigrant also does not read or write very well in English, then you end up with badly misspelled. My town is called Trigiano, okay, Trigiano. Well, there is a, I don't know if it was a death certificate or a naturalization or something, okay? From the south of Italy, we drop our vowels at the end all the time. So if we're talking to anybody about it, we say Trigian, it's just how it comes out, all right? Well, Trigian. I actually have an official government document that says that somebody was born in T-R-E-E space J-O-H-N. Trigian. Good luck finding that town on an atlas. Okay. And we talked about coming from the big city. Okay, Titi Marianne is going to say, we from Bari. Well, that's great. Where in Bari? They're from Bari. No, you're not. Most of the people who live, if you had enough money to live in the big city in Italy, chances are you didn't need to come here for financial reasons. I mean, living in the big city in Italy 100 years ago is a lot like if you're living in downtown Chicago or the heart of Manhattan, you need money to live there. It's expensive to live there. And so it's not like, okay, suddenly you're poor and you're leaving the big city. I'm not saying that nobody left the big city for the United States, but for the most part, we're talking about poor people from little towns who are leaving, not middle-class folks from big cities. So you always need some backup in finding out what the name of that town is if you don't know it. Okay, so finding the town, these are just resources I'm going to throw. I can't demonstrate them too much because the internet here is erratic and a little bit slow, okay? But you're going to want to scribble some of this stuff down if you have not already dealt with it, okay? And in adding to what Tony said, okay, the ellisisland.org, obviously now we're only talking about people that came through the Port of New York from 1892 to 1924. People came through New York before 1892. They were found at castlegarden.org or .com, I forget. And there are people who came through Ellis Island between 1924 and 1957 when Ellis Island closed. All of these people can be found on Ancestry. You can go to your public library, you can go to a family history center if you don't want to pay the full subscription, or you can get a trial freebie from Ancestry and just spend 10 whole days at home going nuts and then cancel before you got to pay for it to get the maximum benefit out of it. And but so Ellis Island only covers, now New York is obviously the biggest port of incoming port for anybody from Europe. But people came into Boston. My group all came in to Boston, not through New York, so it was tough to find them. Some Sicilians, a lot of Sicilians came through the port of New Orleans. Okay, Galveston as well. Okay, I've got connections to some of those that are not my bloodline, but I did their lines too. And they end up coming through these, southern ports. And Ancestry's got most of the other ports, Baltimore, Philadelphia, even ports on the West Coast for if you've got some Asian ancestry somewhere, or your son-in-law or whatever. Ellis Island is tough to search. It's better now. When it first started, it was terrible. If it had any kind of misspelling, and believe me, things are misspelled. Think they're written wrong, then they're read by someone 80 years, 90 years later, and they're put in the computer, and then they make a typo typing it in the computer. You have a whole series of people who can screw this up, and they do. So I looked in the Ellis Island website for anybody who came in from Trajano. Those who know me know I've got a zillion people in my database, and basically anybody from the town I've managed to tie into because I've gone back so far and then done the descendants. So I wanted to see everybody who came in to the United States from Trajano. And then I did it by surname. I know all the surnames in my town, and I searched by the surname. I found 106 different spellings or misspellings of the word Trajano in the Ellis Island website. I mean, they got tree, ... all kinds of craziness. Yeah.
Yeah, I looked on that website. It seems that every page I look at, the handwriting is all the same. So is it pretty much one guy that was doing all the entries?
You have one guy in the port that they were leaving. People think that stuff was written in New York because the stuff at the top is all in English. They think that, like the scene in Godfather 2, the little kid walking around and he reads it and he puts the wrong name down on the piece of paper. That's not how they did it. They wrote it back in the port in Italy or the port in Germany or the port wherever in Europe. That guy was writing down what these people were telling them. Okay, so one clerk is writing all this stuff down. And the good thing is for us Italians is that, at least an Italian ear is hearing an Italian name. They got a much better chance of getting the name right. You have less of a chance if you're a Pole leaving from Bremen or Hamburg, Germany. But now you have a German guy listening to a Polish name, putting his own spin on it. Okay? Steve Morse, the reason his website even exists is because he was having a terrible time with Jewish surnames in his family tree because they were leaving from ports, and the people who were running those ports were not Jewish and had no idea how to handle all those consonants and things all running together. And so those names are all horribly misspelled, or a lot of them are misspelled on the websites. And so he wrote a search engine to search the Ellis Island website. Ellis Island got a little ticked off. They had a little discussion. A couple of lawsuits went back and forth. And finally, they came to an agreement. So the Steve Morse website allows you to search by, we were working with it a little bit before we started with a question. But basically people, you can search for the beginning of a first name, the beginning of a last name. You can do searches. You don't have to have perfect spellings to get these things right. It'll do searches on the beginnings. It used to search even in the middle of words. I got a long story about how, because I found all my passenger lists before all these websites came out. Because I lived on the south side, I practically lived at the National Archives for a long time because of how, when I was starting my work, National Archives, I just run over there. And so I found all that stuff the hard way, and then I went to find it online, and I couldn't find anything. So I was questioning the online stuff, and it turns out they misspelled almost every one of my ancestors' names who were coming in. But Steve Morse's website helped me track down those passenger lists. Ancestry.com does not have a lot of records that are specific to Italy, but they do have a lot of data that helps for people in Chicagoland. There's websites elsewhere that have data. CookCountyGenealogy.com is where you look to get Chicago birth certificates older than 75 years, marriage licenses older than 50 years, death certificates older than 20 years. That index is also on Ancestry. Ancestry will funnel you back over to the Cook County site to pay for, you first, then you, yeah.
On Ancestry, on Christmas vacation, I was looking through my northern Italian roots. I've been to northern Italy, been to the town 6 times. Knew my grandfather, knew where he's buried here in Chicago. But it wasn't until I was on Ancestry.com in my home office at Carroll Street when I found the birth records, bumping my Ancestry.com up to the 275 a year or whatever it was, and I found his entire town, birth, death, and marriage, all indexed, and the town is only like 1,800 people. I don't understand why that one isn't how I found it, but it's just.
You're very lucky.
Yeah. So now I pay the big bucks.
That's
because I
that's
have
the international part of Ancestry. I don't even get that. And, yeah, there's not a lot of that data. I think it's, if people have done that work and have gone ahead and given it to Ancestry, they're more than happy to post the index online and help people out. The Termini Emeresi website, Linda Johnson, I forget. I know that one you have to pay to get access to that information because I've got connections. My granduncle's family is from there, so I wanted to do his Popura line. I can't believe you got no Popuras in all that, all that research. That family's all over that town, but anyway.
What was the Cook County one again?
It's a long word, cookcountygenealogy.com. Yeah, it's .com. And that's where you go directly online to pay $15 to get a birth certificate, a marriage license, or a death certificate. I'm sorry, you had a question.
Yeah, you said before, you made me think of something that I never thought of before, but you said when you went on the Ellis Island website that you put in the name of the town, Trigiano.
Mm-hmm. Without a name at all.
Okay, so that would be the same place where you put the name in for a search. You would just put in the name of the town.
I'm gonna try to pop a website up and see if we can make it do it, so you can see what I'm talking about. But the internet's a little bit dicey, so stevemorse.org.
I always do that for particular hometowns. I've gotten a lot of invitations to dinner as a result of it. I get 500 people from the same hometown, and it's a nice long list, and I put it on a CD and give it to the mayor, and they're very impressed with that.
Oh, this is the Steve Morse website.
This is the Steve Morse, yes. Not, I have to look at Ellis Island to see if Ellis Island lets you do the same thing, but this is how I did it, okay? Things have changed in searching websites in the last 10 years. 10 years ago, and even some websites now, you must put in a couple of characters of a surname in order to do any kind of a search, okay? But Steve Morse's website, familysearch.org, which I do want to talk about because there's major changes in there, even for anybody who's seen me before. But you don't even have to put a name in to do a search anymore. I mean, you literally can say, okay, I want to see everybody who came from Trujano, who came in on a ship called such and such, and came in from Naples. You know, you could really limit things out like that and leave it, you know, and just say, okay, I'm just going to do a search here. I don't even have to put a name in. But before, websites would say, you got to put in a couple of characters of the name. And you know, it throws people who are, you know, again, it says Jewish Jen.
How many are there?
Oh, this is the correct spelling, and there's 3749 just of the correct spelling, although, you know, it starts with Trujano, but if it says Trujano, Italy, if it says Italy, Trujano, it won't come up in that search. You got to do that one differently. So there's a zillion. I figured I'd make 2 seconds, I'd make a complete list of everybody, and I'd know, and I could track them down by family and see who should I search for here in the States. Number one, a lot of people went back home. So they came here and then they went back. And again, then I found so many misspellings of Trujano. So now I'm searching for Adante. Now if the name and the town were both misspelled, I still didn't find them, you know. So that was just a side project I did a long time ago, and then I just shook my head and went, this stuff is very poor, you know, because most of these records are handwritten. And we looked at a couple earlier before the meeting, and wow, you know. Let me get, because I don't want to run until 3 o'clock here, so I want to cover some more different things. I do want to talk about Family Search. FamilySearch.org is the main genealogy website of the Mormon or LDS Church. It is so different. If you haven't been on there in the last 6 months, year, it is so different. You've got to go out there and check it out again. Here's the quick story. My grandaunt is right. The entire world is wrong. I just want to establish, because she says so, and that's the way it is. You may have someone like that in your family. I love her to death, but she's always right. The rest of y'all. So she says years and years ago, 20 years ago, I'm just starting this stuff, and she says there were 10 of us in the family. I'm like, okay, we got Joe and Connie and Dominic and Nick and Tony and Frank and Francis number 1 and Francis number 2 and yourself, that's 9. Where's the 10th one? I think he was called Nick. I don't know when he was born. I don't know when he died. I don't know. Well, was Nick just a stillbirth? There's not going to be a paper trail, etc., etc. So back and forth and back. Look, Auntie, there's only 9 of you. She's the baby of the family, so she wasn't around for, okay? So 20 years of, there's 10, there's 9, there's 10, there's 9, there's 10. I love you, but there's 9, okay? And then Family Search pops up. And Family Search, I gotta take you there. So just you can kind of go, oh wow, this is totally different from what I'm used to. If it lets us in. Okay. It's real good at searching names. For example, if you search for Antonio, it's going to come up with Antonio, Anthony, Tony. It actually knows how to deal with the ethnic variants on names and search for them. Most websites don't cope with that very well. You have to, Giuseppe, this thing will find Joe and Joseph, okay? Now, rather than just searching for names, she didn't know the first name of this kid, this 10th kid, and Abinanti, it'd be the child of that big grumpy guy we had up there, okay? Search by relationships, okay? Now, this thing's got data from all over the place, and luckily, that grumpy guy's called Palmo, not a very common first name of any kind. And her first name is Anna. Her last name is Santoliquido. You can imagine the amount of misspellings on that one. And if you've seen any of my other presentations, you know probably 10 of them by heart already. But I'm not searching for any names. Another search with no names, just people whose parents are Palmo and Anna. Anywhere in the world, anything. And there he is, the 10th kid. They spelled it Albinando. Soundex isn't going to help you find Albinando when it's supposed to be Abinanti. Born March 15th, 1918, which is the only sliver of time my great-grandma could have had another kid. And a birth record, death record. And he's at Mount Carmel in the charity section. And I called my aunt up and I said, Aunt, you've been right for all these 20 years. And I was able to tell her sister literally weeks before she passed away. My aunt was 95, and I said, we found number 10. We finally tracked him down. My aunt would have been alive to witness this, but she'd only been a couple of years old. So searches like this are unreal, okay? And again, Abinanti, if you put the checkbox in last names or first names, it'll give you only exact. So I leave the checkbox off. Albinando, Abinanti, it knew how to find that. That's pretty slick. That search engine is pretty darn cool.
How many others did it come up with?
446,000 hits. So, yeah. I mean,
But that one came up first?
That one came up first because the perfect matches, Palmo, Anna, come up first. I did, Santo Liquito, a perfect search wouldn't have found any of this, okay? So I'm just try playing in here. There's all kinds of great Chicago data.
Is it free?
This is free.
Yeah.
This is 100% free. Let me show you what's in for Illinois in the collections real quick.
What does the camera mean? For business?
It means there's an image, okay? Which means you don't have to go to, I don't know if it'll pop up or whatever. I think I got to click on the name. Yeah, a photo, a little camera there means there's an actual image of this record. So I don't have to pay for this one for 15 bucks. There's a death certificate, bronchopneumonia, Mount Carmel, okay?
How old was
You
he?
can just copy them?
2 months.
Oh,
Yeah. So he wasn't a stillbirth. I mean, he was a real kid, but and he's Carlo. She said Nick. That's close. So she was right, but she was wrong. But I finally found it. I mean, the reason this is here, the reason I couldn't find this before is that 1918 was not searchable at the Illinois website. I don't even know if this is on the Cook County website, but this is a microfilm. They filmed up to 1922, but it wasn't indexed, so you really had to know right where you were looking to use those films. But since they digitized and indexed them, Now you just go in and nail it, and it's sweet. Oh yeah, I was gonna show you what collections are for Illinois, because that's what most of us.
The one thing is if you find the image, save it when you find it, because you can come back weeks later and there's no access to the image.
I haven't run into that, but that's technically possible, sure.
I have run into it often.
Well, you know what, they are adding stuff all the time. In fact, it says 17. Last time I looked, I think it said 15. So, when they're adding stuff, sometimes they pull some things off temporarily, and then you can't temporarily get it. I'll just tell you the ones that are of real use. Okay, Chicago Catholic Church records, says 1833 to 1925. Don't be fooled by that ending date. It's really 1915. There are some parishes that are indexed later. Santa Maria della Rata is one of them. But there's no index yet. So you got to browse these, okay? But it'll actually, you click on that, and it'll show all the parishes in Chicago that have microfilm, and you click on Santa Maria della Rata, or whichever one, Our Lady of Sorrows, whichever one you want, and it'll just be like the microfilm, but it's online and on screen. You don't have to leave your house. Cook County birth certificates. They're all free. There they are. 1878 to 1922. You can search. Carlo Albanando's in there. The register is just line by line, basically the same thing. You really want the certificate. Cook County deaths, 1878 to 1922. And I forgot to mention Wilmette as a family history center, and Wilmette has most, if not all, of the Chicago, Cook County births, marriages, and deaths that are on LDS microfilm. So all this, but most of it's here now, and you don't have to even go to Wilmette. But you
So this, you can get this online?
Here it
All
is.
this stuff here online? I mean, when you click on it, you can get those records.
You get those records, or you go to the search and it'll take you into that collection, and boom, it's all there. And it's free. You don't have to pay the Cook County. Now, if I need something from 1923, I got to pay Cook County to get it.
Did you find anything strange about the 1918 with the epidemic?
Strange?
In the deaths, were they able to keep good track of that? Because it was overwhelming, the number.
Yeah, I think they managed. They didn't. I don't think they had the staff quite as pared down as they have today. They weren't as worried about how many humans were working in an office in 1918 the way now they have every job to, if you're not frantically working, there's two, then, if you've got time to sit and take a coffee break, we cut the number of staff in half. They didn't do it that way back then. I have not run into that. I mean, the Mount Carmel burial logs for the late part of 1918, just, 20, 30 a day. They wrote them all down. They had to. They had to keep track of them. And the problem in 1918 is that people lost so many family members at one time, sometimes they couldn't afford stones for them, markers. So, Cook County marriages, okay, that one, for whatever reason, that goes all the way back to the fire. Obviously, pre-fire, there really is very little. No, I'm not going to update Adobe. I haven't even looked at these Maywood Herald Obituary Card Index. Deaths and stillbirths. This does not have images, but it's got an index of all the death certificates as late as 1947. And you can search by parents, you can search by spouse. So it's really slick. Diocese of Belleville, I have no personal need of that stuff. Macon County. This is probably more downstate. Here's the winner right here. Northern District Naturalization Index. You go into that index to search for your ancestor who became a United States citizen and filed for citizenship. Okay? The Northern District means it covers all of Chicago and all the way to the other end of the state, and a little bit of Iowa, a little bit of southern Wisconsin. It's a federal territory, so it didn't care about where the state boundaries are. And
you get the images there too?
not of just of the index.
Oh.
The index contains these little cards. Okay, I used to have to go to the National Archives to get those. And the card tells you, here's the name, here's the date of birth. So if you know the date of birth, it narrows down that it's the right person. And thanks to our ancestors naming everybody with the same names, naming them after the grandparents, you get a lot of the same name and it's not the right person. You're going to find that in the passenger list, you're going to find that in a lot of other stuff. That Palmo Abenanti up there, he had 7 first cousins, also named Palmo Abenanti. Okay, 3 came here, 5 stayed in Italy. 1 went back to Italy and died out there, of the ones that came here. But this district index, here's the name, here's the date of birth, here's the date of arrival in the United States. Sometimes it says port, so it'll say Boston or New York. That'll help you track that down. And that card then has a certificate number. It might say P dash and some digits, CN dash and some digits. You got to write that stuff down. You're going to need it. And more to the point is over on the other side, it shows you the court where the naturalization occurred. You're going to need that too. If it says U.S. District, that's a federal court. You're writing that down. Federal court means you go to the National Archives and say, I want this file. Here's the name, here's the date, here's the certificate number, the petition number. I want this one. If it says Superior Court or County Court or Circuit Court, then you got to go to the clerk of that court and say, I want this naturalization file, and they'll go dig through their files and probably cost $10, maybe more, and dig that out.
Photos on the naturalization?
On the certificate, well, yeah, on some of the petitions, there might be there's a photo, yes. On some, not on all of them, and sometimes on the certificate. It looks like you just completed a class in Microsoft Excel. It's like, hi, you know. And so it's got a border, and it says, yes, Palmo Abenanti became a citizen on this day in the United States of America, but that's all it says. It doesn't say who his parents were, where he was born. They don't care about that anymore, but it might have his picture in the corner. So that's a, yeah.
Yeah, if you happen to deal with Chicago Heights, they have the actual books of the applications for citizen, Declaration of Intention
Yes.
for citizen.
That's what we're talking
You know,
about.
I used like 1,448 of them. I found 1,448 Italians to go through and digitize them in a time of the 80-column IBM card. And it's very interesting stuff to be able to page through it. And it's in the library there. It was saved by the librarian.
How much does it cost to get copies of the naturalization?
It's been a long time since I've written. I think there was a time when it was $10, you'd get their entire file, including a letter if it said expatriated back to Italy. I think if you walk into the National Archives and say, I need this file, I think it's X amount per page. It might be 50 cents or a buck a page.
I think it was 75 cents.
75?
So
Okay.
that's for the federal court. But then,
Right.
where would you go? I'll tell you this, I did find a couple of my great uncles were from the circuit court, and I went to Northeastern University. And
Okay.
they have a library in the basement, and I was able to get those there.
Okay.
But if something is Superior Court or one of the other courts.
You have to write to the clerk of that court.
Oh.
You might want to go to the website to find out who to write to, and if they give you a form to fill out, you're better off filling out the form and doing it their way than walking in with a bunch of loose little, Post-it notes and saying, here, find this for me, because they don't always handle things. I can't speak for anybody personally in any of those offices, but, when you follow their protocol, they can handle it, and when you just sort of say, yeah, find this for me, they get lost.
And sometimes too, Family Search has a nice write-up about where you can go for other records that they may not have. They kind of give you some hints and tips and tricks.
Yeah, there's a, it might be under Family Search Centers, and there might be, I think there's, well, that's for finding a center. Oh, Learn, here we go.
Learn,
That's, yeah, you want to play around in here. Okay, there's a research, they call it a research wiki. They've got courses and videos and all kinds of stuff on here, way above and beyond what they used to have on the old Family Search website. I really haven't played in here all too much, but there's a ton of stuff on there. If you're not sure what to do next, it's like, well, now that I got this, what do I do with it? That's a good place to look to see where to go next, because they do keep that stuff up. The Catholic Church records for Italian parishes in Chicago are quite good about listing the birthplaces. They don't list them on every record, They're way better about it than the Polish parishes. The Polish parishes say everybody's from Chicago when they were born off in God knows where, Galicia, but you know, that's been my experience at any rate. Death notices, you don't often find the town of birth. Frankly, the place I find the town of birth in death notices is for people born in Ireland. For some reason in the newspaper it says native of County Kerry or whatever, you know, but they never, it's very rare that it says, although I did do a search for some death notices and I searched for the word Trajano and I did find like 12 people where it said born in Trajano, and I found other people who were part of Santissima Maria della Croce, the Trajano umbrella organization here in Chicago. So yeah, I tripped over a few people that way. The Social Security death index is soon probably to disappear because somebody used a 5-year-old dead child's Social Security number to fake their way through taxes, and it got a hold of a politician who jumped all over it, and of course probably didn't get any money from the genealogy lobby of people, so they're trying to work through passing a law that's going to kill that index for us. So which is unfortunate. But if you need the Social Security death index has the number, and it has a link to write to somebody at the Social Security office for a copy of the SS5 application form, and that will typically give you a birthplace too. If for some reason they didn't become a citizen, but they did get a Social Security number or whatever in some other way, they might be in there. But it costs, it went from, you know, it was originally like $2 or something, and it went up to 27 because the genealogist overwhelmed them. If you're lucky enough to find any old letters, my aunt had a letter from her uncle. Her uncle wrote a letter to her. He wanted to send his sons over to the United States to marry her daughters. They were first cousins. We'll start with that problem. And the daughters at the time were like 6, 8, and 10. So obviously there wasn't a lot of data exchange between, but she has that letter, you know, and unfortunately the reaction to that letter caused the Italian side and our side to not talk for 50 years until we went back over there. Everybody forgot who was mad. Seriously. Believe you, I got plenty of stories. Some of you have heard them all, and some of you are like, you're kidding. I was trying to get into this earlier and I couldn't get in. I don't know if it's no, I got it with my phone. PAGINEBIANCHE.IT. It's the white pages of Italy that can help you track down living relatives in Italy. You're not going to know how they're related to you, but if you've got a surname and you've got a town and you're already on your way to Italy and you want to knock on a door, it's a way to find somebody who's living. I got some correspondence going on about 10, 12 years ago within our family after finding some people on here.
Can you repeat that again, please?
It's www.PAGINEBIANCHE.IT. Yeah, Jerry.
When you search that, if you don't find a name, it doesn't mean the relative isn't there, because lots and lots of Italians in small towns have telephoninis, cell phones.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, when I was over there in 2003, everybody in Italy had a computer. It was in the corner holding up a bookshelf. It was a desktop computer, and all it was there was underneath because the leg broke off the table. But they all had cell phones sideways and backwards even then, and now, yeah, so the cell phones, right, but the older relatives who still have a landline, you might at least have a shot at it. We talked about that. As far as what's microfilmed, there's 11 parishes that are designated as Italian parishes. That does not mean that every Italian went to an Italian parish. If your family had been here a long time, they've been here since the 1880s, and by 1915 they've assimilated and speak English, they might not be in the Italian parish anymore. They might be in a closer non-ethnic parish or an Irish parish. But if they were just off the boat and couldn't speak a word of English, they were going to end up probably at one of the Italian parishes in the Little Italy neighborhood. Anybody who here has used the Catholic cemetery kiosks? Who's going, what are you talking about? Okay. At most of the main Catholic cemeteries in Chicagoland, I mean the big multi-acre, huge ones, there's a kiosk usually in the office. There might be another one in the mausoleum, which means you can go in and use it on a Sunday when the office is closed. And these kiosks will allow you to search for all of the burials within the entire Cook and Lake County Catholic Cemetery system. Now that data is by no means complete. Is it online, someone asked? Not yet, but they're gonna. No, it will not be online. They say it's private, but yet I can walk into the kiosk and use it. So I don't understand the logic, but I'm stopped fighting that battle with them. Like I said, it's not every cemetery has it, but any of the really huge ones, you know, All Saints and Ascension, Libertyville, and certainly Queen of Heaven, because there's no office at Mount Carmel. But you hit a button at the beginning that says just this cemetery or all cemeteries. So just hit all cemeteries, and you got to type in just the last name. The search engine's pretty pathetic, but that's how they got it. So you search the last name. Hint, hint, if you're looking for Viola Nitti, and you're at the top, and you got a million Annas, and you're scrolling down and scrolling and scrolling, type in the last name and put an A at the end of it, N-I-T-T-I-A, enter, and then scroll back up to get to the bottom, the Williams and the Violas. It's a way of, because otherwise you got to just scroll down through the first names and scroll up through the first names. They do not let you search by first name. So that no matter what name you look for, you got a bunch of Annas to start with. So, Chicago Tribune Historical Archives, you need to go through your public library to get access to this stuff, or set up an account at the Arlington Heights Library, because you don't have to be a resident of Arlington Heights. You just go in and say, I need an ID, and they'll give you one, and then you can access. What this is, there's two different Chicago Tribune archives for searching for death notices of your relatives. The Historical Archives makes it much easier to search for death notices rather than every square inch of the newspaper. Okay, and it's also, you know, it's much better indexed. There's a ProQuest Historical Archive also, which you might find also at your public library website, or you have to go to your public library to use it. And yes, it'll find every mention of your family in the newspapers. You might want to keep some of that stuff secret. I found some wacky stuff in those. Okay, I want to talk about Italian records. I want to make sure, of course, I get to the U.S. Maybe I should just talk about the 1940 census real quick, because we're now going to Italy records. Okay, April 2nd, I guess because April 1st is a Sunday, that would normally be the day it would flip. 72-year privacy rule, okay, and expires, and April 2nd, the United States Census is going to be online. There's going to be three main places you can find it. Okay, I can't show them because it's not there yet. The National Archives website is supposed to have it, and it's supposed to be indexed at some point. It's going to take time to index it, and it's going to be free. Okay. www.nara.gov is the National Archives and Records Administration website.
NARA?
NARA.gov. That'll certainly give you a link. There's probably, I think there's a specific web page for 1940 census, but it's a much longer URL. So use that one and click the link and it'll get you there. Then you can put it in your favorites. Also, Ancestry.com is going to have it and is going to index it, but of course you have to pay for Ancestry. And FamilySearch.org is going to have it, index it, and give it out for free. So there's going to be three different places you can look. So if you happen to go to one of them and it's real slow because everybody's on it because it just came out. Remember Ellis Island when it first came out?
Yeah.
Anybody try to work on that at 4 o'clock in the morning and you still couldn't get through? I still haven't caught up on my sleep from that, okay? It's been 12 years, 10 years. It's going to be the same thing for the 1940 census. So if one site's slow, try the other one. Maybe they'll all be slow, but at least you can try different ones.
Well, they all,
yeah.
you mentioned three different places where you can see the 1940 census. Will they all be working from the same index, or are they three separate?
I think they're going to index it separately, and that's a good point, because if they do and you have trouble finding somebody in one, try to find them in the other one in case they misread the handwriting. Yeah.
We both just signed up today to be volunteer indexers for that. You can do that through your genealogical.
Please spell everything right.
Yeah, I promise. Only the Italian.
Yeah, that's what I wanna index my town when they put it on Family Search, and they make it an indexable project. I wanna go out and actually index my town's name so that I make sure they get done right, because I've seen those names for 20 years, they're burned in my little brain. But again, it won't be there till April 2nd, I don't know what time on April 2nd, but, you know, the clock's been ticking and everybody's excited, yeah.
And you say there's a lot of errors, can you correct those errors?
Well, if the website gives you a place where you can put a note, Ancestry does. So if you happen to see, let's just say it's M-O-R-R-O and it's wrong, and you want to correct it. So you can put a note saying the real spelling is M-O-R-O, for example. And at least that gives, it will then search under either spelling. So the next time you go to look, it'll find it. And more to the point, somebody else looking for that name will find it under either spelling, and that'll help them find you maybe, or tie into your lines. I don't know if Family Search has such a system, or if the National Archives. This is the first time National Archives is putting their own data out there, because they don't have the older censuses out there. They've left that to other people. But here's the thing too. Now the 1940, please watch for my next column in Franoy. It's going to come out in May, but I had to already write it, so I can't. It won't say anything about how to get at the data, but it's going to tell you what the questions are that they asked. You guys remember when 2000 and 2010 some people got the long form and it asked them how many toilets they had and a whole bunch of personal questions, and a few people got a little. What does the government need to know this for? Well, 1940s when they started that gobbledygook. They picked line 14 and line 29 on every page of 40 people, and those two people got asked a set of supplemental questions. So that's how they did it randomly, just by how it landed on the page. So unfortunately, if the 14th person is a 2-year-old infant, they're going to say, how long have you been married? You know. And 29, so that's the way they started with those little supplemental things. Some of the data that was in the 1930 is not going to be in the 1940. There's a lot of focus in 1940. There's two things to keep in mind. There's a focus on employment because, of course, now when 1930 came out, the crash had just happened. The Depression had not taken over the whole country within 5 seconds, okay? It just screwed up the Wall Street people at that time. Domino affected everybody else through the 1930s. By 1940, there were so many people on relief rolls, FDR New Deal programs, that there's a lot of questions about that in the 1940 census, if your work is for one of the FDR agencies and so forth. And how long you've worked at that, and were you working last year at this time at the same job. There's a lot of employment questions, way more than there used to be. The second thing that's different is it says, name your country of birth as of 1937. Now, why did they do that? Very simple reason. Because in 1940, Maurice Chevalier was from Germany. Huh? I thought he was French. He was. But in 1940, guess who ran France? Hitler and Germany. Okay? So, Ignaz Paderewski was German, No, he wasn't. He was Polish. He was from Poland. But in 1940, it was part of Germany. They had taken it over. So they say, as of 1937, what country were you from? So that eliminates the geographical malaise going on at the time of the 1940 census, where Europe was in a fit. I want to really quick cover some of this stuff. When you've got your name of your town and you want to search, you go to that hit familysearch.org and hit catalog. Again, the people from the north are not going to find a lot of microfilm on their stuff. Okay, they just, the area that was the Papal States in the middle, and especially the northern part. The northern part you might find something, but it's going to say the civil records of Austria 1806 to 1809, and then it stops, or 1809 to 1815, and then it stops. Napoleon, we have to, for whatever he did, we thank him for making these records, because the church kept all the records before then. He says we need a non-church-based record keeper, the government. Then he got thrown out, and the north said, we don't need those records anymore, but the south evidently didn't get the memo, thank goodness. So you're not going to find every town in the catalog. But you're gonna look for the word civil registration. You're gonna occasionally find church records. There's some church records for Sicily, there's some in Trento. Different places where they allowed them to be microfilmed. I don't think they're allowing anybody to microfilm any church records because it's a church thing. The LDS is not the same as Catholic. Pope Benedict sent out a note. Politics, you know. You're going to run into that word, okay, that's the record keeper. And that's, when you run into that, those are the kind of records you want to be looking at, okay. You're not going to find anything newer than 70 years old because of a lot of privacy restrictions, but that's okay, because most of us have to go back a little bit further, or we at least know somebody born in that town in that era, okay. 1809 to 1929, I'm lucky enough, and some people are lucky enough to have stuff filmed over a 120-year period. Not everybody will. You might get you get some in Potenza that's 1860s and 70s. It starts, it ends. It just depends who was keeping the record. The way they filmed them is they would write them all out at the local town. They would take it. They would then make a copy, and this is not a Xerox machine. This is a guy writing it a second time, which means it's a little less accurate. He gets bored. And then they'd send those off to the provincial archives. The LDS people would go to the provincial archives because they've got all the records for 16 different towns sitting right in one place. They get one permission, they get set up one time, and they just film everything that's in that room. That doesn't mean they get everything, because not every, you know, the guy was late, he was sick, he didn't write the book from 1870 to 1929 for that town, and therefore the provincial archive doesn't have it. So you're not guaranteed to get anything, okay? Again, up in the north, you get some very small era years there. Sicily, a lot of it starts in 1820, and then comes into through about 1900 or 1910, which the old privacy law was 100 years. And so some of the films stop at that point because they figured no one needs any of that stuff. It's going to cost you some euro, some lira, some stuff if you're just going to be writing to Italy. I didn't do a lot of writing to Italy directly until I went there. Please just do all of the research you can possibly do in the United States before writing to Italy. The reason I say this is there's no point in sending a letter over there with money, waiting for 4 months, and then getting a reply back for a birth record from 1885. When the microfilm may already exist here at an LDS Family History Center for the cost of a film, about $7, $8, something like that. So don't waste your money and then wait all that time. You're going to get very frustrated not being able to do very much. You're going to say, I spent 20 years doing my genealogy, I'm back 3 generations. That's not a lot. I mean, it's nice, but it's not a lot. Okay? Sometimes they keep the cash. Typically, I wouldn't send money in the initial letter. I would make sure it's written in Italian and say, I'm going to, tell me how much and I'll send it. Okay? It might take months. They're not fast working on this stuff, or it won't come at all. If you can't get the record on a microfilm at LDS, okay, well, they're only filmed up through 1866 in my town, and I need to do something later than that, then yes, you're going to have to write to them. Always ask for the names of the parents. Sometimes they don't put that on the piece of paper. When they send you something from Italy, most of the time they're going to only send an extract. They're going to write it out for you and send it as a printed extract. And if you don't ask them for the names of the parents, they might just leave that out, which unfortunately is something that you might need. Okay, the types of records you're going to find. I really don't have a chance to show what they all look like. He showed a birth record. It looks awful when you first see them, but it's a form. And only certain little spots on that form are the ones that are the places you need to look. Okay? You get births, marriages, and deaths. Let me say something for the completeness of the records over there. They're really darn complete. Births have the parents' names all the time. Marriages the ages are very accurate of the bride and the groom. They list both sets of parents. They list whether they're living or dead. It'll say, Palmo Abenanti di Vito, means Vito's alive at the time of the writing of this record. Mother, Palmo Abenanti Fu Mariana, it means Mariana's dead at the time of the writing of this record. You use that to narrow down when somebody died in Italy, because you're not going to know. Unless somebody has written that down in your family Bible later. death records, the ages are notoriously inaccurate. Everybody died at a 5-year interval. 60, 65, 70. I mean, how petrified do you have to be when you're turning 69 years old? Like, oh no, I got to get through the whole next year. And if I can get through that, I got another 4 coming, you know. They do give you marriage bans, which are similar to the marriages, but if you can't find a marriage record of an ancestor, it means they might have married in another town. They typically married, not where the wife was born, people say that, but it's not really true. It's where the wife's father lived, because they were dealing with the dowries and all that. Attidiversity is if you run into an ancestor who happens to be a foundling, he's left at the church. My great-great-grandfather was a foundling. So his birth record's not in the births, it's in the diverse acts. Annotations of deaths is, you're not going to need that early on. Allegati is real sweet. When people got married, they make up an allegati file. They'd have to walk in and say, yes, I've never been married, she's never been married, my father's dead, her mother's dead, or my first wife is dead, and they would supply all the data for that. So here's the marriage, and here's all the supporting document that says it's legit for us to marry. And that's really slick information. Because sometimes a woman goes in, she gets remarried, her husband came to the United States, died in a coal mining accident in North Dakota. How are you going to find that? Unless they told you he died in North Dakota, 1903. Who remembers? But the darn records will be in there. In the Allegati records, when my great-grandma married again, there was a copy of her first husband's death record, written in Italian, transcribed from the Brooklyn, Kings County death record, because he died the day he came in through Ellis Island. And he died in Long Island College Ospedale in Brooklyn, and there's a death certificate there, and they wrote that death certificate in Italian in the Allegati so it could prove to that civil records official, her husband ain't coming back, she needs to marry this other fella. So, sweet stuff, and we would have, I mean, we knew he died on the way over, but we didn't know how, and that was how it found.
What is annotazione di morte?
Annotazione di morti. There's some on death records. I haven't gotten too much out of it. It's another kind you might find in the catalog, but it's mostly not every town has it either. It's mostly within the death records. They give you some more details, but keep in mind, when you find death records in Italy, you're not going to get the cause of death. I know we all want to have a health history, and it would really be slick if we had 6 generations of, okay, died of a heart attack at 42, died of a heart attack at 44. It'd be nice to know that, maybe, but you're not going to get that from there. Unfortunately, a lot of people died of contagious diseases long before cancer and heart disease took their toll and established a health history that you need to know about for you.
Annotazione means annotation.
Yeah, it's just it doesn't have a lot. There's not a lot in there, but oh yeah, okay. This is stuff I already covered here. I just wanted to see what's next. Every record of these towns is going to contain. Keep in mind when you're reading the Italian records for the first time, the first thing up at the top is it's going to say that on the 18th of July, 1885, and you're going to go, oh, Grandpa was born on July 18th. July 18th is when they went to the mayor's office to tell the mayor that on the 16th there was a baby born to this couple. Okay? I mean, I walked into my aunt's, the one who's always right, and I said, dates are wrong for Grandpa, great-grandpa, this one, dates are all wrong. She goes, and because I didn't know what I was doing at the time. And I learned real quick, okay, the top says this is when it happened, when they went to the mayor. In the middle it says, this is the day it occurred. Okay, I can't get into how to translate every record. We need a multi-day course for that.
Isn't there a witness or something?
There's witnesses down at the bottom. Those honestly don't, because the records are so complete in Italy, there's little need for the witnesses. If you're doing research in Alabama in 1837 and you happen to find a document and it says, you know, Jeb so-and-so was born, and it don't list his parents, but it lists who the witnesses were of the birth or something, then you might need that because it tells you where they were and what families they were friends with. And you know, when you're doing really early American research, and I haven't had to do a lot of that, that's where the witnesses really come into play.
But it does usually tell their occupation, the
Mhm.
witness's occupation.
But the witnesses can be family members too.
Well, they can be family members too, but let me get, luckily I don't get to hang around in courtrooms very often, but sometimes there's people who just hang out in courtrooms and they're there all the
They're
time.
the same witness for everybody.
And they're the same, and you end up with 40 straight birth records, all with the same guy as the witness. It's like, you know, or the witness might be the midwife who helped with the birth. Well, guess what? She's the witness for everybody's birth. She's running from house to house, you know. So you get a lot of repeat witnesses, which doesn't guarantee that they're relatives tied together, yeah.
What does it mean when the midwife, excuse me, is the informant?
On a civil record or on a church record?
On the civil record. I mean, usually it's the husband or the father of the child, but I've seen some where it's the midwife.
It might
for the
be,
preaching.
well, yeah, the midwife might be the informant if the baby is born posthumously. There's no father to be the informant, and guess what? Ma's kind of laid up. So somebody's got to go tell the mayor. So it might say that. You do occasionally bump into a grandparent because that's where they live. Frequently it's the owner of the home where the birth occurred. The midwife doesn't always fill that stuff out. You will find baptism records, though, in the church records that say that this baby was baptized by the midwife because the baby was in imminent danger of death. It's all written in Latin that way. And that means, okay, this baby came out and it doesn't look good. We better baptize right away because the baby was going to go to limbo if it wasn't properly baptized. Remember limbo? Pre-Vatican II, I don't know what happened to all those limbo babies when they abolished limbo. I don't know, I hope they promoted them to heaven, but it's not fair, you know, they're just...
50-50 chance.
It's a yeah, I mean, it's, but point is that, you know, they wanted to rush those kids to be baptized, and if it didn't look like they'd make it to the church to be baptized, the midwife, there were documents in the Latin church records in my town, which basically was here's the priest writing a whole long piece of paper deputizing this woman to be able to baptize that kid real fast. I don't know what, you know, they said the quick Hail Mary, they said, Amen. That was the Hail Mary because they didn't have time for anything else. And whammo, that kid was baptized, and that helped get him into heaven real quick. Yeah, another.
I got a question about the birth records. When it has the name of the parents, is the mother's name always listed under her maiden name?
Mothers go by maiden names from the day they're born until the day they die and the day they're buried. Even in the cemetery, they go by the maiden name. When you're looking for the passenger list coming into the United States, the women are under their maiden name even if they're married. It's very important. Oh, do I hear, the revelation? Oh, I can't, no, that's why I couldn't find Grandma's passenger list. Yeah.
No, I just thought they were living in sin.
There's no records of that.
On that birth record, does it show what town the parents are from?
Not always on the birth record. It will say where they're living, which is usually where they are,
The address?
but it won't say the marriage record will have the birthplaces of both the bride and the groom and of the parents, usually. But not the birth records, just, you know, usually it just says, here's the father who owns this home, and then underneath it says, you know, here, the name of the mother, and then it says sua moglie or something, it says his wife, you know, which helps tell the living in sin part. You know, well, the living in sin part you can find out because here's a birth record, and then off in the corner.
That was on an Ellis Island thing where they came over together, but she had her maiden name.
That's absolutely normal, yes. And here's the fun part is that I'm not the only person in this room who can say this. The people came over like this. The fathers came over usually by themselves. I mean, they came with paisan, but they came over alone, left the wife and kids at home. They needed to establish a job, and you know, and then they sent money home, and then they'd come over. The rest of the family would come over as a group. So here comes mom with her maiden name, and here comes all the kids with no surname. And guess what? They're indexed in Ellis Island under mom's maiden name. They didn't go by that name. My great-grandma was Anna Santoliquido Abinanti, okay, but she's listed as Anna Santoliquido on the passenger list. Her children by her first husband, who were supposed to be Laturi, are all indexed to they're indexed as Lanto Liquido, actually. And then the son born to Abinanti before he left is also listed as Santo Liquido. So they're all in there under their mother's maiden name. Good luck finding that. Because they just put ditto marks underneath her name, which is not right. So you might trip over that one if you're looking for, well, my grandpa came over as a kid with his mother. Check under her maiden name if you can't find it.
Have you run into what I think I ran into in Amazano, where I was looking in the civil records, and the civil, because the Italian government and the church were at odds until 1929, the commune did not recognize marriages in the church. So all these people were listed as living in sin.
Illegitimate.
And the children were illegitimate.
I honestly haven't run into that. I know you told me about that, and I know about the whole church-state thing, but I didn't run into having a block of illegitimate people caused by the fact that they dug their heels in and they weren't going to kowtow to whoever, you know. But it did happen that way.
Well,
There's
it
no
was
question
really a
about it.
shock to find that all my relatives were living in sin.
Well,
It didn't bother you.
Mine do now. I mean, it's, you know, yours were very progressive, and mine are all, you know, now.
They didn't have the money to.
Boy, a wedding invitation. You want to see something rare? A check in the mail and a wedding invitation. Okay, there's not many. I'll wind this up real quick because I'm already over, which I knew I was going to do, which is why I wanted Tony to go first. With it, I'm amazed at his book. I mean, I haven't done anything like that as okay, here's a presentation of data to everybody. I've just shown him those complicated charts, but he's actually made it out as a book. And I guess on April 13th, Friday night, there's going to be another presentation here with, also with Kim Palmisano and with Petals from Roseland, who were, CJ, okay. And so we could talk about Friday, but there's going to be a more of a talk about the family history part of this than the genealogy part of this, which dovetails into what you've done with your book. And
yeah, the presentation of the finished product of your genealogy.
yeah, well, there is no finished product. You'll never be finished. There is no finished.
Finished product.
Yeah, this is finished as of today, as of this moment.
Is there an Italian Genealogical Society website? Or are you starting one?
Well, there is.
There is one.
The one group that's out there is called Point. Been out for about 20, 25 years now. They just started out as a place where people would send the surnames and towns in, and then other people could see that and say, hey, that's a guy I can talk to. He's researching in Termini. I need to research with him. Here's somebody from Trajano. I need to contact this guy. Point then spread out and founded little local chapters around the country. I ran one for quite a while. I had to disband it because of some personal issues in my world. We would just get together and talk about this kind of stuff in more depth, and people could exchange ideas of their research and so forth. But there were two chapters in Chicago. There was a Southside Chapter 1. Tony Lassio from Franoi founded that until he passed, and then it's kind of been hanging on since then with other people. And then my chapter we ran for quite a while, and right now it's on hiatus. So yeah, there's a lack of Italian genealogy groups in Chicagoland, certainly because of that. But
You know, you've got like 35 people in this room here, and it seems to me that rather than everybody taking a chance at taking a turn at reinventing the wheel, it'd be better if we could go to one place to help each other
There
out.
is an online Italian genealogy, that's what it's called, Italian genealogy dot whatever, where people can post different information that I've come across.
There's part of Family Search. Actually, when they were just putting this together, they pulled me aside specifically. I mean, they had a big meeting in the LDS church, a bunch of LDS members and me. And they basically everybody pulled me aside and said, please don't post your entire data file to this website. You're going to kill our file servers, okay? So I was evidently going to end the LDS file servers with my data file, because it's close to 70,000. They're not telling me to not post anymore, okay? But they're linked family trees that are on that website. It's mostly the trees submitted by LDS members as part of their temple baptisms and temple, the sealings and all their research. I don't know a whole lot about all that. But you don't have to be a member to get that data out there, and it'll show you, here's your records, and hey, we think we got a match up here off in the corner because somebody out in New Jersey traced their stuff back, and yours is up here, and here's the link that might be true up here. And then you can look at their data that ties in with possibly with yours. I still haven't uploaded that data because I just want to kind of hit a point where I'm finished. Yeah, right. Where I'm happy with what's out there so that I can defend whatever data they say, are you sure about that? And I can go find it and say, yep, absolutely.
And there is ItalianAncestry.com. I haven't visited it lately, but it did have a lot of resources.
Are there any other questions, or, I mean, I'm already well over, and I still have a lot more content, but why don't we hit the questions, yeah.
Supposedly my grandfather invented or founded the pepper steak, and Cupsnet wrote about it in his column. I think it's in the 40s. Do you know of any searchable? We went to Newberry once and was looking through newspapers. I think it's the Chicago Herald American or something.
I was just going to say, in the 40s, yeah, I don't know where Cup would have been writing for. There's the only searchable paper of Chicago that I know of as far as the big papers is the Tribune. There's no Daily News Index. There's no Chicago Sun-Times, all those other papers are not indexed online. There's some smaller papers that are indexed on newspaperarchive.com, and you have to pay for that. But not the big Chicago other ones. I wish they were, because I got family that put no death notices in the Tribune whatsoever. Everything's in the Daily News for some reason. They were a Daily News family, yeah.
Just a couple things. On that point, the Chicago Public Library site actually has the Herald Examiner for about 5 or 7 years, in like 1910 to about 1917, which is fully searchable, which is really nice.
Okay.
Secondly, Italian Gen on the East Coast is extremely useful if you had any family coming and being born or died in the East Coast.
Mm-hmm.
What I found in my research is that the birth records in particular